Welcome to a conversation. It's one that I've been looking forward to. I have three friends here who have incredible stories of their experience. Now, the stories are all, they have a common theme, but they're different because they're individual stories. And so I'm going to ask you guys, Bryan, Jenny, and Gary, would you share a little bit about your story specifically and let folks watching get to know a little bit about you?
Sure. So I was sharing with Jenny and Gary on the ride over. It was about 4 years ago, almost today, when I just started experiencing what I thought was just a really bad stomach ache. And it just persisted and got worse. I started retaining a lot of fluid and gaining a lot of weight. And in the middle of the following month, so the middle of September, I finally felt bad enough that I surprised my wife and scheduled an appointment at my doctor, which kind of freaked her out a little bit that I voluntarily decided I wanted to go to the doctor. And by the end of that day, I was diagnosed with end-stage liver and kidney failure. And later that night, given 60 days to live, barring a miracle. So the miracle was to keep me alive long enough to get a new liver and a new kidney. My experience was not smooth. It was a very eventful next 65 days. But the end result of the process was on Thanksgiving Day 2018, I was wheeled into surgery at 5:30 that morning. I got a new liver, and the next day wheeled back into surgery for a new kidney. And woke up that Friday afternoon pretty excited. So Thanksgiving has taken on a different meaning. It's been different every year. It's not that day where you're trying to avoid being around the wrong family members or anything for a whole day. But you just remember how grateful you are for everything that happened to allow you to still be here for another one. So the hugs are a little longer. The things mean a lot differently. The little entrapments that can sometimes happen with big family groups when you get tired of people and need to go. Those don't get to you as much. You let a lot of things just not matter anymore because they really just don't matter. It's interesting. This time of the year, it starts to come back up. All the social media memories start to pop back up, and I've often thought of deleting them so I don't have to think about it anymore. But then I sit there and read them, and just sort of live back through it all. Give thanks for all the comments and all the support and all the prayer that people were providing. So pretty much for the next 3 months, that'll be part of my life, is reliving all that time. But if talking about it helps some other people through the process, or helps encourage someone to become an organ donor, or give someone a little sliver of hope when they've gotten the diagnosis, that's what I hope will always happen as a result of sharing the story.
Absolutely. Jenny, what about you?
Well, mine started back when I was about 40, when they found I had emphysema, COPD, and it went very slow for about 20 years. And then as my lungs decreased, it got down to, I was evaluated several times, and then finally when I was down to 17% lung capacity, I was put on the lung transplant list, and I had to wait 1.5 years for, we think there was a mix-up that they had me on the list for double, and which I was told I'd get a single. And so when it came through, I was very patient with it because I knew that the right lung and the right timing, and that it would happen because God would make that happen. And so it did, and it was quite scary, to get that phone call. But after 1.5 years, I got a left lung transplant, and all went smooth for a few weeks. But I had 3 years of in and out of the hospital, which was difficult, and ICU a few times. And but my song that kept me going was Even If, because regardless of what I was going through, my peace was there, and I knew that regardless of what happened, I was in God's hands. And so whenever I'd go in the hospital, I would just say, you know, God's got this. I'm good. And but it's been a journey, that's for sure. But a very thankful one and grateful, and life is so beautiful, and God's creations and all that, you know, you just did in awe of what the great nurses, doctors that I had, and I still do. I see them often, and couldn't be more thankful.
Wow, that's good. That's good. Gary, what about you?
My story starts in 1995. We moved here from Kentucky for me to take a promotion. We were in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky. We moved here. Within 6 weeks, I had 2 heart attacks. We did not know where a hospital was, so we drove to one, which was a big mistake. When they finally did the echo after they got me stabilized, I had half function. And once a heart muscle is damaged, it doesn't get any better. And I was still working, of course. They allowed me to come back with no problems. And I flew a lot of places, and then I got to where I could not fly because of lack of oxygen. So I had to drive every place. And I was passing out at work there. I worked another 15 years. There toward the end, I was passing out at work. And a couple times it was in front of the elevator. And when the doors opened, those people were really surprised to see me laying there. So, I was surprised. But so I had to drive everywhere. And then one day I was going through West Virginia. I topped a rise. I looked down, I was doing 70 miles an hour, and that's the last thing I remember until I hit the guardrails. Fortunately, I skidded into them, took side out of a vehicle, but I wasn't hurt. Thank heaven no one else was around for me to hurt. I don't think I could have dealt with that, truly. And my cardiologist, I went to VCU because the cardiologist I was seeing at the time said, you got to get to the heart failure clinic down at VCU. So I did. They started putting in devices, defibrillator, biventricular assist pacer, and then in 2012, they told me, you're going to have an LVAD. And I wasn't too wild about that, so I postponed it. Just wasn't going to consider it. And then in 2013, something happened at Cool Springs. And I've told you before. At the end of the service, Brad said, everybody sat down. And anyone that needs something, stand up. But keep your eyes closed. Everybody keep your eyes closed. And if you heard someone stand up near you, put your hand on them. And I felt hands. And for one thing, I never thought I would stand up. But I did it before I realized. And I felt those hands on me. And that just made all the difference in the world. And I started fighting at that day. And I started going to cardiac rehab as had been recommended, and I wouldn't go. I went to Weight Watchers to lose weight. My intention was to beat the LVAD, but it was unbeatable. So in 2015, I had to agree to it.
So you did the LVAD, and for a period of time, and then the heart transplant.
2 years and 3 months, I had the LVAD, and then the heart transplant in March 2018.
So I know each of your stories, and I've observed kind of your journey, and what I realize is that in each of your stories, there's a timeline. The timeline's a little bit different, but there's a question that I really want to ask you about kind of where were you mentally, where were you spiritually when the decision became imminent that the transplant was your future? What was going through your mind? Where were you spiritually? Maybe what was it that got you through that decision?
Yeah, so for me, it was finding out that day that it was my only hope, the day I got diagnosed. So spiritually, I was fine, because one of the things that got us through that first night was stopping to pray, because we hadn't prayed about it during the course of the day, because the day was a whirlwind. I went in that morning thinking maybe I'd pulled a muscle in my stomach or just had something wrong, like something that could be fixed with a pill. And then I was finding out that night that I've got 60 days to live unless I can stay alive long enough to have a transplant. Emotionally, I was exhausted. So even being able to think straight that night was a battle. It was writing things down through the course of the day, having the doctor leave that evening going, try to get a good night of sleep, and just laughing at him, like, how am I going to go to sleep with this? Faith-wise, and where I was the entire time, and we've talked about it a lot, that never wavered in terms of where I would end up. And I've shared with people before that the day that I was being wheeled into surgery, the liver doctor just looked at me and goes, "Man, you look so happy." And I said, "Yes, I am happy. Like, I'm gonna get a new liver." And he said, "No, it looks like just more than that. It looks like you're so at peace." And I said, "I am at peace." And I said, "If I don't think you know why, but wherever I wake up, I'm gonna be really happy." And he knew what I meant, so he was like, "Okay, let's go." And so, that was the one thing that kept us going the whole time. Jenny mentioned the song. I had my own song, and it was I played it over and over and over and over, and I still play it all the time. It's just that one thing you could cling on to, though, that would get you through a rough time. And we had lots of those rough days going through there. Lots of times where we were given bad news, and then 10 minutes later given good news, and then a half an hour later given bad news again. And so emotionally it was a roller coaster. I think waking up after I was in a coma for a few days, might have struggled a little bit on that one with a couple of questions to God. And I think having the allergic reaction the one time and having my heart stop, and looking up in the air and saying, you got to be kidding, this is the way you're taking me out. So, we used humor a lot. I always use humor to get through things, and so I've always had that deep-seated belief that I could talk to him about anything that was on my mind. And I got asked if I was ever mad at him. I was like, no, I was never mad at God. It doesn't mean that we didn't argue some, or at least I argued. So he was probably up there going, I got this. But sometimes it's hard to understand exactly, like, I don't know what your plan is, but it'd be nice to have a little bit more clarity on it. But the faith part never wavered. I knew he was in control, and I knew that however it ended, I was either going to be happy to be here or happy to be in heaven. So that was just a big confidence thing the whole time. So, but yeah, the emotional part was different. That was being worn out some days from that. And you got to witness some of them. But there's so much that goes on because you're thinking about the transplant, and the part that goes through your mind is you're praying for all of this, and you realize that there's a family that's going to lose somebody, and that's like, how do you pray for that? So you pray for peace for a family that's going to lose somebody, because it's the only way you're going to make it. And so it's even thinking back about it, it can still be hard to fathom. Like, how do you pray for that? It's like this. So I shared with Gary earlier. So there is a commonality that transplant recipients can have guilt, and I didn't know that other people had it, so I experienced it, and it wasn't the guilt of successfully getting an organ transplant and thinking someone else didn't. It was the guilt that I have this because somebody died. So there's a guilt feeling for that family, and it sticks with you. And I had a tough time getting through it. So on and off for at least, a good year. It messed with my sleep patterns. It blocked me up during the day just thinking about it. And finally there are people who know about it, and they'll talk to you about it, and it just took some time. I still think about it, but I've seen, since I went through it and learned about it, I've heard other people talk about it, and it's when people go, well, they'll try to play it off. It's it's a circle of life thing. I'm like, well, maybe it is until it happens to you, and then it's it sort of takes on a different feeling when you're the one dealing with it. And I assume that's probably a lot with pretty much any illness or tough situation that people go through. So it's been one of the things that I do talk to people about when I talk to them, and I encourage them, don't feel guilty. So I was there, I understand it, but so anyhow, that's a good point, Gary. Thanks for asking.
So what about y'all? Mentally, spiritually, where were you when that was the path that you were going to have to take?
I'd have to say mentally for me, I had emphysema ran in my family. So I had seen my mom die from emphysema, COPD. And so when it got to where, because she died at 60, so when I got to, my late 50s, I was like, uh-oh. So I was scared of that, and I was physically, by the time I had the transplant, physically I was exhausted. It took so much energy to go up 3 flights, 3 steps. Lost weight. They told me I had to eat 3,000 calories a day because I just kept losing weight because I was burning off, more calories than I was able to take in, because you can't eat and talk and breathe at the same time. So mentally, I was exhausted and tired and waiting for the transplant. But spiritually, I knew that God had this, and I knew that He was in control, in the right time, the right place, the right lung would happen. But it was exhausting during those times, and scary of what your future, because it was fairly new, in the beginning. It didn't come into play till after my mother passed away. And so it's, it was just a scary time to know what you're going to have to go through. And some people, very easy road. Other people, like myself, had, ups and downs for the first 3 years. But God saw me through this, and I am so thankful. He blessed me, and can't be more thankful.
That's good. That's good. What about you, Gary?
I don't mean to blow sunshine at you, but really what happened in 2013 changed me as far as going to rehab, starting to lose weight, as I mentioned. So I was just never afraid. I was never afraid. I knew the Lord was going to take care of me one way or another. I didn't think about the fact that somebody had to die to save me. Afterwards, like Bryan said, you wonder who else could have gotten this heart and do more for mankind than I'm ever going to do. But it's a gift. You use it every day. You take care of it every day. One thing funny, you mentioned comedy. Or trying to stay funny. One time, I had a defibrillator in 2016. It went off 22 times in less than an hour. I cleaned our family room floor with my back, the back of my shirt, while a little EMT chased me around. And they got me to VCU, and you've heard people being able to light up a room. For 2 days, I could light up a room. We didn't even have to turn the lights on. I had a lot of electricity go through me in a short period of time. It's just, my attitude was so, I appreciate it being so good. I was just never afraid. I was never afraid. My family prayed with me. My wife, I should have already mentioned her name, Paula, and she went through everything I went through over the years. And there were times she didn't know whether she would come home and I'd be dead. And, you know, sometimes I wasn't sure either, especially when the LVAD quit working as well. And for 18 months, I spent over 7 months in VCU hospital. And I had a stroke finally, just for the fun of it, I guess. And then after all that, I had to be reevaluated for heart, and that happened in February. And one thing I prayed for was to get to see my youngest grandson. And at the end of February, they came, and I got to see him from South Carolina. And in 2 weeks, I got the call.
Tell us about that, each of you. Tell us about where were you when you got the call? What's going through your mind? Maybe
I was laying in bed, asleep, and the phone rang. I had it right next to the bed because I was having to stay downstairs in her twin bed, and I answered it, and I heard Martha's voice. And I said, where do I got to be, and when do I got to be there? And there was a peace that came over me. I hollered into old Paula, and she started getting dressed. I got on the phone and started calling people that had prayed for me and my relatives. She came down, and she was pretty upset with that. But, and I must say, in all honesty, when they said, we have your heart, I'm not making light of anything. I thought they had it in a refrigerator in a Tupperware dish or something. We have your heart. What I didn't know, his heart's still in the donor. The heart was not recovered until sometime after midnight the next day. And then it was put in me because the heart can only stay out 4 hours, maybe 5. And then it's useless.
wow,
So you're on a tightrope.
no.
I'd have to say I had just gone in, it was like 12 o'clock, midnight, and gotten in the bed when the phone rang. And of course, I live alone, and of course, then I went into complete panic. I was like, so I got on the phone with my daughter, because Missy is my rock, and I'm like, okay, I just got the call. And I mean, I was just in shock. I didn't even know how to move. You know, I just held onto the kitchen counter, scared to death. And so they said, okay, you have to be in here within 3 hours. And of course, we go to Northern Virginia to the Inova Fairfax Hospital. So we got all, you know, loaded up, and she come and got me, and we got up there, and it wasn't until the next day that I was able to have the transplant, because like you said, they had this person, I don't know who he was, I do know he was a young man, that he was giving his heart, his kidneys, and other things, so they had to take care of all that before they took the lung. And but yeah, it was scary, it was exciting, it was nerve-wracking, but a peace that you knew you were going to be okay regardless.
So we were in Charlotte. I'd gone through several days of procedures down there after being transported from Richmond on a very expensive plane ride. It's kind of a funny story. But they actually, during the time I was in Charlotte, one of the things they found a lump on my thyroid that kind of threw a kink in things. And so we got that taken care of. And then the Monday before Thanksgiving, they actually came to me and said, "You've stabilized enough. We're going to let you go home for a couple days." And so we expected to come back on Wednesday for just blood work, and then go back to do Thanksgiving with family. And then the goal would be to come back that Friday and just check back into the hospital and then wait. So Wednesday evening, when we were at my niece's house down in Charlotte, I was sitting on the floor with my oldest son and my niece's little boy, and we were just playing, and my phone rang. And this was about 6 or 6:30 in the evening, and I wasn't expecting anything, because we were just going to go back. You know, we'd been to the doctor that day, and they hadn't said anything, so not, hey, you're next on the list or anything like that. So the number that came across my phone, I didn't recognize, and I didn't have it programmed in. And at that point, I probably had 10 different numbers related to the transplant, and the doctors programmed into my phone, so I didn't know who was calling. And so I saw this number that wasn't my caller ID, and I just pitched my phone back on the couch. Didn't think anything of it. Important note, if the transplant center calls you, you need to answer your phone. You don't, because you don't have very long to call them back before they move to the next person. So within seconds, my wife Ann, her phone rang, and my son picked up the phone and was like looking at the voice-to-text voicemail that was left, and they're both like poking me, going, "Look at your phone, look at your phone." So I got the message, and it's, this is the transplant center calling. We have an offer for you. Call us back as soon as you can. So I called them, and they said, we have organs for you. I was like, I'll be there in 20 minutes. We had a bag already packed, and we're ready to go. And they were like, no, you have about 4 hours before they're going to be here. Just get here when you can. And I was like, okay, we'll be there in 25 minutes. Like I wasn't hesitating. We were ready to go. We were shocked to get the call, but my wife, my son, my niece and her husband, everybody was happy. So we did a hug and a goodbye, and 25 minutes later, we're at the hospital, ready to go. So there was excitement, there was relief, I actually felt like I could probably rest a little bit, knowing it was coming. And then about four hours or so of just pre-op routine stuff. When it was time to go, I was ready. I was like, let's go. So had a little bit of fun with the liver doctor on the way in, told him about why I was so happy about it, but I also asked him, he said, do you have any final questions? And I said, well, I haven't asked yet, but where did you finish in your class? And so that kind of broke it up a little bit, and we were kind of laughing going through the door of the operating room. So yeah, we were ready to go. We were excited. It caught us off guard. But it was a great call to get. So no hesitation, no nervousness, it was just, it was only 65 days from diagnosis, but it felt like a long time because it was so full of activity. I don't know how I would handle what Jenny and Gary had to go through, waiting years, or in Gary's case, having to deal with it for lots of years. So everybody's experience is different, but I'm sure everyone's excited to get the call. Nervous, probably a little scared because she's by herself. I think I probably would have been too, but we just sort of had the plan laid out. Everybody knew what they were going to do, and so everybody jumped into action, and we hit the road. So,
things in life, experiences shape us, and some experiences define us. They truly do change our life. This is probably both a shaping and defining moment in your life, transplant. But how has that changed you? And how has that affected you in a sense? How has it changed your outlook on life maybe?
For me, it made it easier to realize that what I'd been doing for 30 years, I was no longer passionate about. And I think going through that point where knowing life could have been over, would I have had regrets for not acknowledging that what I was doing, I no longer had a passion to do. The only problem was I didn't know if I knew how to do anything else. I figured I could probably put a shovel in the ground somewhere, but I wasn't sure. So going through that and having an opportunity just to think about everything you'd been through in life, because I didn't sleep very much, voluntarily anyhow. So I made a change. Within days of having the transplant, I called my business partner, and I told him before going into the surgery that I didn't know how it was going to end, but one way or another, he was either going to write my wife a check or me a check, because I was done with what I'd been doing. I dove into nonprofit work. A lot of that was just giving thanks for the United Network for Organ Sharing, for UNOS, and what that nonprofit does for so many people. But then starting to notice all these other charitable organizations that were doing such good work, and having family members that were impacted by what they did, and friends that had gone through it. I just wanted to do more to support them. And I guess, as Gary's saying that, I went ahead and had a stroke. I didn't have a stroke, but last year I decided to throw a heart attack into things, and that gave me an opportunity to shift gears a little bit more, to get into helping people deal with situations like this, help them emotionally and mentally navigate through the chaos in their life. So I spend more time doing that now, speaking and helping coach folks through it. So it pushed me towards that. My wife will tell you that I got rid of some of the nasty sarcasm that I used to have before all this, but I don't want to change myself too much. So, yeah. But I think the biggest thing was, again, waking up every morning, though, and just saying, all right, you kept me around for another one, and wondering how the day is going to go. Like, where are you going to take me? Who are you going to introduce me to today? And just having that open mindset as well to really look forward to each day. It's, probably sounds a little rote to say that, but I'll guarantee all three of us think the same thing, that when you see the sun in the morning, you're like, all right, got another one. So, and when you get to experience sunset at night again, you just look at it differently.
Just waking up in the morning and my quality of life is so much better. Not being on oxygen 24/7, having the strength to exercise, and it's just amazing. The quality of my life has changed. And it just brought me so much empathy and compassion for other people, and just loving life so much more and being thankful for every breath and for every morning.
Absolutely. What about you, Gary?
I think they will both agree. You wish you could take the feeling, a little piece of the feeling out of your brain and share with everyone. It would change everyone. You just see life differently, believe me, and you're more compassionate. I smile more, I wave more, I treat people better, except for Ted Tussey. I have a little problem with that. I'm on the board of LifeNet as the recipient representative. I do speaking for LifeNet, like Bryan does, for UNOS, and I also volunteer as far as going out into communities and discussing it with people. I had one lady, going back to the waving, I walk a dog every day, and this was about a year after the transplant, and we were walking, and a young lady stopped and said, I want to thank you for waving of the mornings. She's a young lady. She took a picture, love it to death, and I thought, many times, boy, I'd love to see her again and just say hi, and she made my day. Wasn't long after that, I was at VCU, the endocrinology. They sent me down to have a blood draw. There she was. And we received another picture, got another picture taken, and I truly appreciate that. I'm more sympathetic toward people. I realize everyone is battling something. Everyone in this room is battling something. Everyone you meet. It may be small to you, but it's big to them. And not just people at Cool Springs, but our neighbors, our kids, our spouses, everybody is dealing with something. And this is kind of a tragic story, but we had a neighbor, 28-year-old neighbor, it was on the 4th of July. They were at the river. He committed suicide. And his wife told me he was a donor. They recovered his organs sometime after midnight Thursday. And what was going on with him at 28 years old that he was that desperate? We don't know who we're running into or what they're suffering.
What do you want people to know about organ donation? You've got a platform right here, right now. You have each of you have a platform in a number of different ways, but just like in this moment, what would you want people to know about organ donation?
Well,
any of you.
that a donor can save as many as 8 lives. It may be 9, Bryan, I'm not sure. I know they can save 8 lives when you consider they can, cut the liver into different pieces, and they grow back so quickly. They can save lives. And the people I have met that are donor families feel good that they know part of their loved one is still here. that it's helping his organs, or he or she's organs, are helping someone live and continue on. Now, I know I have received 2 cards from my donor. I have written them numerous, or from my donor family. I've written them numerous letters and telling them always that I'm taking care of this heart, that I appreciate what they did, that I would not have them lose a child to save me. But I appreciate it. And if you ever want to hear your son's heartbeat again, you let me know and I'll get there. But like I said, all I know is the mother's name and the name of the donor son.
I'd have to say that, you know, people put their donor on their driver's license, and that's great, but they're not going to ask you for your driver's license when you die. And so your family has to know, and they have to be the ones that give the okay to give your organs. So your family, you know, you need to make sure they're on the same page you are. And
There are times the family said no.
Right, right. And so, yeah, your family needs to know what your wishes are.
So everyone in my family is a registered donor, and I think we were all donors before I needed it. But the impact or the thought process was that you can have such an impact on the recipient's family. You can give somebody their father back or their wife back or their kid back. Not to sound too cold, but when at a point where you're not going to need it. So that's so it sounds simple, but it's really the impact, like the legacy impact it can have. Those people are going to love you they're going to love your family forever. They're going to be so grateful. And the same aspect, you know, one of the things that's just as necessary are more living donors, more folks who might be willing to give a kidney or give a part of the liver, which they can. And that's a lot of people. They're so altruistic in life. It's a way they can help that they might not otherwise be able to. But the impact of one person wanting to donate one of their kidneys to someone who desperately needs it, because the waiting list for kidneys can be a long time, and if you're out 5 or 6 years on the kidney list, your chances of surviving are pretty slim at that point. So I've been able to be a part of paired kidney donation and direct kidney donation from living donors, which is really interesting. The directed kidney is just, you need a kidney and I'm a match and I want to give you one. So there's a process to go through. And the paired process is that multiple people are involved. And if Jenny and I are family and I want to be able to donate her a kidney, but I'm not a match, then UNOS will find another group or another pair, and it can be multiples, and they'll do the logistics to work it out. So everyone in the group who wants to donate a kidney is donating the kidney in a timeline that can be then shipped to where it needs to be for folks who need the recipient. And it's an amazing process to read about or to know that's happening or to know someone who is impacted in either of those situations. So that's what I tell people is just the impact that you can have. It's hard to tell somebody, hey, I need you to give one of what you have to me. And you're not going to tell them they're being selfish if they don't want to do it, because it's a big decision to make. But you just try to talk to them about what a gift it could be, and you let them know that you're not going to hold it against them if they don't want to do it, because it's a little bit of a change in their lifestyle, a little bit, not a big one, but still sacrifice that you're asking them to make. But the end result is what I would try to get them to focus on, is look at what can come of it. Look at all the lives that can be impacted. And I think, I don't know, I think if you have some compassion about you, having the feeling that, as I said earlier, you can give someone their family member back just by saving their life, by doing it, is something that, what bigger legacy, true legacy could you leave? So, yeah.
See, that's why I love this shirt Missy got for me.
Yeah.
It says, I was saved by Jesus and my lung donor.
I like that. I like that.
The largest need for donations are kidneys and livers. 80% the donations needed are kidneys, 12% livers, and those are things that can be given by a living donor.
I think the other thing too is to let people know that it doesn't matter how old you are. You may think you're too old or not healthy enough, but you don't know. If you just make the election to be considered, the transplant teams will figure all that out. So, and then some people like to know clarification on what the actual process is for a deceased donor. I know Gary and I have both talked to people that have concerns about what happens. Like, if I'm looking like I'm brain dead, are they going to actually pull the plug on me just so they can get my organs? And it's nothing like that. And so I know Gary's talked about having conversations with people like that about that. It's understandable that people would have a concern. So you just try to give them the assurances of what that process is like, how dignified it is. So, one of the things about the donation process for a deceased donor is when the family's made that decision to agree to donate their loved one's organs, there's a process called an honor walk where the medical staff from the transplant center of the hospital, they just line the hallway from the person's room basically to the elevator. But it's very dignified. It's such an honorable thing to do that it's the medical staff's way of just giving thanks to the family and to the donor. And it's something that if you've never seen or haven't heard of or anything else, like if you want to be truly moved by something, just go to YouTube or just Google honor walk and watch one or two. If you're not moved by it, then I would question your ability to fog a mirror also. So yeah.
Kind of a question that I've not supplied you with. I said I had some trick questions for you, right? But there is family involved, and family takes this journey with you, and how they navigate that. But I realize there'll be some people that are watching this that are faced with a decision, or they're faced with this journey. Is there something that you would say to them to encourage them in that role, in that journey, about organ donation or as a recipient? Wisdom?
Well, the thing that I would tell that person, and I probably would be even better to ask the caregivers that we all had, is to make sure they're also getting care during the process, because it wears them out. Anne was in the hospital 24/7 most of the time, sleeping on the hard bench in the window or trying to get comfortable in the chair. And the thing that I would like, you can only make her do so much because you have control over nothing when you were in the situation I was in, is trying to get her to leave. Go home and get some sleep, go home and take a shower, go get your nails, just do something to get out of this. We did have friends that picked up that slack for her, would come in and make her leave and just hang out with me for a couple hours. But that would be the biggest thing is, yes, you're caring for this person, but they have an entire hospital also caring for them. So make sure you're getting your rest. There's going to be a time when that person that you're caring for needs a healthy you in there. So, when you're in a coma, for example, and waking up and have no clue where you are, I needed a healthy Ann in there at that point. So, that'd be the biggest thing I can think of.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, and I'd say, like with Missy, my daughter, that us being 2 hours away, and I was in the hospital for 6 weeks, and then we had to stay in an extended stay for another 6 weeks. And she, just like you say, making sure that she got away from there and, did her thing or went out to dinner or just something so that she took care of herself. But needing her, a caregiver, being my voice, being my ears and my sight, and my advocate to know when I couldn't make those decisions. And that was hard. She said, you know, I'm not a good nurse. I said, well, you were a great nurse, but she was there to always, you know, make sure they did the best, which I had excellent care. But yeah, they need to be your advocate for sure.
We were very fortunate in that Paula worked at VCU, and whenever I was in the hospital, she could walk across the causeway, come up and visit. But I never let her stay overnight. You go home and rest. But you know, different situation than Bryan. We were so close, and I had been in so much. I knew the nurses, so we just picked up where we left off last time I was in there, and that made a world of difference. The saddest day when I was after the transplant was when my son came from South Carolina, and we all had lunch together. And when they left that night, I was as low as I could be. That was the worst night I've ever spent, to see them all leave. Next morning I was okay, but I bawled all night.
I want to say thank you to each of you. You know, I know each of you, love each of you, and have watched your story and have had the privilege to pray for you all on this journey. For each of you, many people have as well. And I want to say thank you for your transparency, and thank you for your willingness to share, and for the encouraging words that you've given. But one of the things that I was thinking of prior to us sitting down was we knew how to pray for you when you were sick and going through this process and the journey and waiting for the phone call and up and back with up in Nova and everything else with the lung and just, I mean, we got the updates. We knew how to pray for you then, but how can we pray for you now?
I mean, the simplest thing is to pray that everything continues to go smoothly, that you know, the organs stay healthy, that you know, we don't run into the situation again, I guess. I mean,
Sure.
I mean, I feel like everything, like, so you go through this, you're really sick, and then all of a sudden you're back to normal. And it's, so you wonder some too, a little bit like, well, what do I do now? And you just get back to life. So yeah, it's kind of an odd feeling, because I literally walked out of the hospital 6 days after the surgery, and I mean, I was aggressive. I wanted to leave. So I had actually, one of the liver surgeons came up to me and started asking me if I was, like, if I'd ever, like, I think Gary got asked the same question, if I was having any anxiety issues or depression issues. Why did I want to leave the hospital? Because I've been in the hospital for 58 of the past 65 days. That's why I want to get out of here. So they were a little impressed. I had to pass a PR test, or a physical therapy PT test, which is a whole nother story. I've never hurt so much trying to get through something physical, and tried to do it with a smile on my face the whole time. And then when the physical therapist walked out of the room that day, it was the day I got discharged, but when she walked out of the room, I was still gritting my teeth trying to smile, and she walked out, and I told Ann to close the door and pull the curtain. And when she did, I fell back in the bed and crawled up into a ball and just bawled, because I was hurting so much. But I was so excited because I knew I'd passed it. I was like, I'm going to be leaving this place. So that's, like, I hope to never have to experience it again. so yeah, just, you know, praying for that.
No.
Yeah, in my continued situation, because of the medications, I have stage 4 kidney disease and congestive heart failure, so I get a lot of fluid built up occasionally. And then, as I told you earlier, my right lung, which is my native lung, is with COPD, as it's expanded all the way over to this side and is pushing this lung, the good transplanted lung, so it's causing me some breathing problems. So they're just that they continue to keep me healthy, and it's a balancing act with all the doctors and the medicines, and but they're doing a good job.
So I think hearing that, you think any of the prayers you were going to make for me and just give them right to her. Here's something else.
Bless your heart. I didn't know that. I want you to pray that I continue to realize this gift every day, because that's what it is. And I wouldn't be here. You know, when you think of that, I would be dead without this gift. I want you to pray that I continue to be the person I've become since this. This has given me the opportunity to be a better person, be a better husband, better father, better person to everyone. And I will share this. When you were talking about recovering, I was in hospital 21 days, which is longer than I should have been. And in that length of time, I lost 30 pounds. And it's a good weight loss program. But then I had to learn to walk again. Could not walk. And they told me about 6 months afterwards, VCU said, we didn't think you were going to make it for the first. And now I go to the YMCA at least 3 times a week, 2 hours. And I work hard. Most guys pump iron. I do pump aluminum, but I work as hard as I can. And if I could share with you, I wrote a poem a couple of years ago when I was speaking at VCU, because I wanted them to make sure that we remember our donors. And it's simple and it's quick. Dear donor, how can words ever express what you did for me that day? I do not know the look of your face, nor do I know your name, but I think of you, appreciate you, and remember you every day just the same. And when my life is over, and from this world I part, I pray I'll get to see your face and thank you from the bottom of your heart